board previously met in closed session under exception C1 and C11. I would like to call to order the January 12th, 2021 Board of Education regular meeting. If I can have a roll call, please.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Ms. Hannah? Ms. Callahan-Wozniak?
Present.
Ms. Leguizamo?
Present.
Mr. Castellanos?
Present.
Mr. Ewing?
Here. Thank you. So we have all board members present. Did I hear Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we have all board members present with the exception of Ms. Hannah, who is feeling under the weather and will not be with us this evening. With that, I would like a motion to resume open session.
Mr. Riddle, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Wozniak. Any comments, questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak?
Yes.
Ms. Leguizamo?
Yes.
Mr. Castellanos?
Yes.
Mr. Ewing?
Yes, we are now back in open session. I would like to just mention is we are meeting remotely due to the current pandemic and COVID-19. After consulting with our COVID coordinator, it's been determined that this is the safest way for both the public and the Board of Education to meet. You are able to join remotely using our GoToMeeting link. We are also broadcasting live on YouTube to combat our overflow situation for those who may be interested but unable to get in. And we do look forward to a time when we are back in person, but for now, the safest option is for us to continue meeting remotely. With that, I'd like the Pledge of Allegiance. So I don't know, Ms. Wozniak, would you be so kind as to lead us in the pledge?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Those words mean so much as we just reflect on the incidents that happened this past week at our state capitol. One of the things that makes me most proud about being on the school board is it's an elected position. It's one of the positions that is closest to the people and emblematic of our democratic process. So to see those who would seek to overturn a free and fair election, I'm glad, as I don't always agree with everything that this nation does. I am proud to be an American citizen and happy to be serving the residents of Waukegan. With that, we're going to move right along to our opportunity for public comment, which is another sacred thing that we have. Our public comment gives residents and non-residents 3 minutes to speak any topic. We do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you need translation services will be provided to you and you will receive 6 minutes. We do ask that you not mention the name of students or staff members in your remarks. Mr. Alajakis, do you have the first name?
Good evening. The first name tonight is Mr. Ray Vukovic.
Mr. Vukovic, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Vukovic, your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good evening. And I'd like to also say, we're proud to be Americans and God bless America. At the last board meeting, I questioned some credit card purchases made by the superintendent last April at Walmart. The superintendent addressed this matter later in the meeting. I questioned the purchase of what I thought were groceries totaling $343.95. The superintendent defended her purchases, stating that she did not purchase groceries, but it was a garbage can and speaker for her computer at her home office. The only reason I referred to the purchases as groceries is because that is how it was shown in documents provided by your legal department in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. As soon as I was done speaking, I emailed each of the 7 Board of Education members with the information that I received from the FOIA. The superintendent told the board that she would send documentation to the board. 5 of you never responded to me, but 2 board members did forward the documentation from that purchase. The first item was $68 for a garbage can. Yes, a garbage can. The other receipt did not specify the purchase, but it was for $249, but the superintendent indicated it was for a speaker for the computer. And that's okay, we've got that. As I've said in the past, I would hope that this board is prepared to start reimbursing teachers, paraprofessionals, and secretaries for expenses that they incur for working from home like you do the superintendent. Also, you should be aware that $26.95 was paid on these purchases for Illinois sales tax. Shouldn't this be a tax-exempt purchase? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic. Next name on the list, Mr. Alajakis.
The next thing we have this evening is Miss Margot Gillen.
Margot, are you on the line? I know you also emailed me your remarks, but are you able to unmute yourself and speak?
I am unmuted, hopefully. Can you hear me?
We can. Great to hear your voice in the new year. So your time will start once you begin.
Okay, thank you. Dear Board of Education and the governing administrators, I want to thank you for your protection and insights while staying the course through this pandemic to protect our children, our families, and staff. Most of all, I appreciate your willingness to do the right thing and allow the community to heal. This takes time. The board's leadership is preventing deaths, the mass exodus of students, and union strife that can last for years. It is this leadership that will overcome much of the past negative publicity that has made the teacher shortage so grave in Waukegan. Waukegan will set themselves ahead of other communities and will minimize the teacher shortage that is nationwide in years to come with the knowledge that we were looking ahead to the future and not making hasty, dangerous decisions today. Thank you. On the other hand, I hope that the board is understanding and building a firm foundation as more and more students are getting less and less special education services and being mainstream. I have had many teachers come to me feeling they are being set up for failure as they are expected to do more with less. While we are under federal mandates to improve students' access to general education, we must not do so without building the infrastructure. Moving our students into general education will not provide them with the resources they need to succeed. It is not cheap. Instead, we are pushing them before their time. Many changes in placements were made at the end of last year. They have not been tested out as we are in remote teaching. Currently, I was talking to a teacher that has been spending 20 minutes each day before class starts just to help a child find the right page in a book in the 7th grade. A child that cannot find page number 95 is not capable of being in a general education ELA class. We need to provide more training, more resources. This is done in many communities and in many school districts, but we need to have smaller class sizes and many more resources for some of these children. They are not cheap to educate. We need to maintain the federal mandates, but we need to do it with judgment that you have shown in so many other ways. Thank you for your continued support and work for this community.
Thank you, Margot. Mr. Alajakis, are there any other names on the list?
That concludes the names I had on the sign-up list this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Alajakis. If we can get the agenda back on the screen. All right, we are going to move to our consent agenda. Our consent agenda is done to expedite the work of the board. Those who attend these meetings frequently do know that sometimes we go late until the evening. So this was a practice implemented by previous board president Mike Rodriguez and continued by me. It is an effort to expedite the work of the board, but it is not an effort to hide what it is that we are doing. Any board member can request any item be pulled out for any reason. And so I want to open the floor right now. Is there any items that the board would like voted on separately? If not, I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. But items A, the purchase of the pre-K student materials. Item B, Crisis Go self-certification software. And item C, Deputy General Counsel contract extension.
Mr. Riddle, I so move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Wozniak. Any comments or questions on the consent agenda item?
Board President, this is Leguizamo. I have a question.
Go for it, Ms. Leguizamo.
In regards to item B, Crisis Go self-certification software, I know that we have another student achievement meeting coming up on Tuesday. So will the team go over additional information in regards to that software on that presentation?
LeBaron, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, board members, Ms. Leguizamo, and administrators and community members. Ms. Leguizamo, this particular software, as it goes through the implementation phase, is going to be reviewed and part of the training instructions for staff, students, visitors, and parents who may utilize it. That is going to be a more detailed platform to provide the information. We can certainly review some additional documentation at the meeting next week, but this is going to be part of our training series to engage individuals back into the school buildings prior to them physically coming.
Okay, because I have lots of questions in regards from the community in regards to this software, how it's going to go, how it's going to flow. What I'll do is that I'll send you those questions, and that'll help you prepare for either that in-depth training or if you wanted to peruse a little bit of it on the Tuesday's meeting.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Board President.
Thank you, Ms. Leguizamo. Anybody else? All right, so we have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Riddle,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Yes.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak,
Yes.
Leguizamo,
Yes.
Mr. Castellanos,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing.
Yes, item approved, motion carries. We are going to drop down to item 11, personnel.
Good evening. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the administration's recommendations to approve the appointments and accept the resignations as found on schedules F949 and L896.
Mr. Riddle, I so move. We approve this motion.
Motion by Mr. Riddle.
Second.
Second, so Ms. Wozniak seconded. I think she caught you, Jeff. Any comments or questions on the motion?
Well, yeah, I think we need to just to air out maybe some misconceptions for the community, I would say. And we're talking about hiring teachers, right? This is the
Correct.
okay, and I think that just to clear up a lot of nonsense, so I want to say we're at a point to where we need teachers in our buildings where we haven't had, where we've been using substitutes. And we're at a point to where as though we got some teachers coming in from the Philippines, and these teachers are certified teachers that went through the procedures just like any other teacher went through interviews through virtual, and they were hired. And then it was looked at all areas that was covered to my knowledge, and that was that to try to bring teachers in. And so we had gotten the teachers from the Philippines to teach, to come into our special ed classes to deal with our students. Well, once again, I want to reiterate that we've been using teachers, but they've always been substitute teachers. So now we have permanent teachers, and it was noted that I think that was brought to that I had brought to the board's attention, that when these teachers do come in, because they're dealing with special ed children, and most of the special ed children are from African-American children, most of them, and irregardless, I think the teachers, because of the fact that they're coming into an urban community in an environment dealing with students of color, so to speak, that they're going to be needing some culture training to go along with their academic training that they already have. And that was suggested, and I think the administration heard us loud and clear, and hopefully that happens.
Duly noted, Mr. McBride. Thank you.
Mr. Castellanos?
Yeah, can I just say this should be a huge celebration for the district. This is a big number of teachers that we're bringing on board. So I hope that families out there can feel confident in the amount of teachers that we have from the Philippines, and confident that we'll keep bringing on more staff. As you all know, it's hard to hire teachers, especially in special areas. So this is a proud moment.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes, I would also add to that the fact that we still have 17 vacancies in this diverse learner department, that we are looking for more teachers. They are very hard to find. Some of them are required also in special areas like math. So these are positions that are not easy to fill. So we want to compliment the HR department in looking at, lots of places to bring some of these teachers on board and to continue to try to fill more of the vacancies that we have. Thank you.
I too will admit to the public that I actually struggled with this item. Many of you remember last year when we discussed this, it was about, we actually denied a travel request to go to the Philippines and recruit. And part of the conversation revolved around local recruitment efforts. This was, so for me, the process, I would have liked us to come back before the board to actually discuss it a little bit more, because as Mr. Riddle said, even with these positions, there's still a great need. We won't be at capacity. So I commend the effort that was done. I want us to stay focused on this. I know when we talk about staffing, recruitment, and retention, that's a big focus. Superintendent knows one of the things that I have mentioned and pursued is that I do want us to aggressively figure out what other options we have to not only recruit locally, but even what Mr. Figueroa did with his Puerto Rico recruitment efforts, which I think was another stellar victory, where we got tons of teachers who, many of them remain with the district to this day. And some of them, when we were in class, even received, kudos, because over 80% of their students met their growth targets, right? So my issue is not with the teachers. I did have an issue with the process, but given the fact that we have over 30 plus vacancies, and this will help us move in the right direction, I will be supporting the recommendation. And there's also a administrator who's been with the district who is on the agenda as well. And so I'm excited that we continue to recruit, but also retain our local talent. So are there any other comments or questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Callahan Wozniak?
Yes.
Ms. Leguizamo?
Yes.
Mr. Castellanos?
Yes.
Mr. Ewing?
Yes, item approved, motion carries. And the only other thing I'll mention is for taxpayers and residents is that no monies were, expended outside of gas to get the individuals from the airport here to Waukegan. And that's the other testament, which is saying it's true for our teachers from Puerto Rico and other recruitment efforts, is many of them choose, well, not many, 100% of them chose to locate in Waukegan. right? So as they're here, while they're here, they will be here in our city limits. And that is something that we want to continue in an effort that I'll be speaking about during the President's Report. So we are going to continue grants and donations. I see none. Let's go to 14A, financial reports, ratification of the first processing of board bills for January 2021, manual check request payments, and first Midwest insurance payments for the period of December 3rd, 2020 through January 5th, 2021.
It is recommended that the Board of Education ratify the first January 2021 processing of board bills, manual check request payments, and first Midwest insurance payments for the period of December 3rd, 2020 through January 5th, 2021. The accounts payable board December 3rd, 2020 through January 5th, 2021 payments total $2,961,163.78. The manual check request payments for the period of December 3rd, 2020 through January 5th, 2021 total $3,922,165.51. The first Midwest insurance payment for the period of December 3rd, 2020 through January 5th, 2021, payments total $1,059,706.01.
Mr. Riddle, I so move we approve this motion as recommended by the superintendent.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions?
Yes, Board President, this is Leguizamo.
Go ahead, Ms. Leguizamo.
Just quickly, this question is for Dr. Cuevas. I believe I did see him on the line. Can you confirm you're on the line, Dr. Cuevas?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Sorry, sorry, Superintendent, I just bypassed you. I apologize. But it is an IT question. I just wanted to confirm here. So we have a total of 2,000 hotspots. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's what I was looking at when I was looking at the payments in regards to the hotspot payments for T-Mobile. Thank you for that clarification. Those were all my questions, Board President.
Thank you. Any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Riddle,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Yes.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak,
Yes.
Ms. Leguizamo,
Yes.
Mr. Castellanos,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing.
Yes. All right, and I do just want to take a minute. Motion approved, item carries, but I do want to take a second to, if we could go back under personnel. Typically, when we have our admins, I do want to recognize Mr. Kirkwood, who has been over at Jack Benny for the last 3 years and has really, helped bring that school to where it is, first as its assistant principal and then now as its principal. Mr. Kirkwood brings a wealth of knowledge to the district, having been in administrative positions previously. So thank you, Mr. Kirkwood, and we appreciate your continued efforts for Waukegan Public Schools. As a 39er, as I tell you often, I'm glad that you are continuing on a legacy of excellence. All right, if we can continue with the committee reports.
Board President, this is Leguizamo. So I have an update in regards to the PTAC, which is the Parent Teacher Advisory Committee. We had met on December 16th. Just to kind of give you an update as to what was discussed. We have 3 different subcommittees, so I'll give you some highlights from the subcommittees. The Bully Prevention Subcommittee is looking this year at board policies as it relates to bullying and is looking forward to making some recommendations to the board on some updates. Their next meeting will be February 2nd. The MTSS Subcommittee is working on rolling out a framework for social emotional learning to the school district, and their next meeting will also be February 2nd. The Behavior and Discipline Subcommittee is diving into behavioral and discipline supports, enrichments, interventions, and to diminish opportunities to exclusionary discipline. So they are diving into that and will be providing some information to the board this year. That next meeting for them will be January 14th. As a whole, the three subcommittees meet together and form the PTAC. And as a whole, the PTAC team is working on putting together some suggestions and recommendations on how to implement the new student appearance policy and the mask mandates for return to in-person. That PTAC meeting will be on January 20th. So I just wanted to let the community know that if anyone would like to join any of these subcommittees or the PTAC committee, please feel free to reach out to myself, or you can reach out to Mr. Eric Christensen, which is chair of the PTAC committee. His information can be found on WPS60.org's website. If you hover over the community section and select community committees, you will find his email there, which is echristенsen@WPS60.org. That's my update for the committees. Thank you so much, Board President.
Thank you, Ms. Leguizamo, and I know that they are recruiting parents as well. So as Ms. Leguizamo mentioned, please reach out. Okay, and now, any other committee reports? Student board member report. Mr. Weddle, are you on the line? Does Mr. Weddle let us know, like so many of our students during the pandemic? Mr. Weddle, is that you?
Yes, I am online. Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Weddle, the floor is yours.
All right, I only have like a few. So we have faced a lot of challenges last semester for remote learning. I can say I have struggled a few times keeping up with school and home at the same time. I've talked to just a few students in clubs on some of the pros and cons about learning, the remote learning. Some say they love the time schedule. It enables the students to prevent hectic commute and even the hassles of trying to reach the class on time. It keeps their mind off anxiety and stress. So, yeah, there's some of the pros. That's some of the pros. And the cons are no physical interactions, less motivational. Distance learning don't help in developing oral skills and social interactions. Difficult to choose a quality educational program. And some clubs are not allowed to really communicate with each other seriously. So yeah, that's it.
Appreciate that, Mr. Weddle. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, you're certainly right. That only just applies to the students. I think with there's a lack of, should I say, a lack of camaraderie with the board at this time because we're not able to communicate physically. So you're right. I mean, I know I have that problem myself when I'm doing it virtually. I would trying to express myself, and at the same time, that communication, eyeball to eyeball contact, it makes a big difference. It just sometimes I feel like I'm out on an island virtually here, and something is missing.
Right. Sometimes like people have technical difficulties, and I know teachers have had a lot of them, so it kind of cuts off the class work.
Well, I thank you for staying connected, Mr. Weddle, with your classmates and for being an advocate, your efforts with JRTC as we look to now have our fourth student board member who will be coming on board soon. We appreciate the unprecedented nature of your term, right? We 2 months after your appointment, we went remote. So I just had a memory that came up with a picture of you and your mother from when you were sworn in last year. So I thank you for serving with honor and with dignity, and for always speaking up on behalf of your classmates and not being able to tell us, what's actually going on, being true to yourself. So thank you. And I know, just want to check in, keep us abreast. You have all our email addresses. Reach out, let us know what's going on, is because your voice is an important one. And glad that you and your family are well during this time.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Weddle. We are going to go to delegates report. Ms. Hannah, as I mentioned, is under the weather, so she will not be here for delegates report. The superintendent has let me know that tonight, given that we have a very important presentation and lengthy one next week related to the school COVID-19 update and plan as we look at entering into phase 2, or what next steps are with remote learning. So we are going to hold off on the superintendent's report this evening. President's report will be brief. I mentioned earlier about recruitment efforts and giving the tools that we need in order to come to Waukegan, as well as getting people to invest in Waukegan. I've had this conversation with administration as well as other officials, but I'm bringing it to the board, and we don't, obviously it's not on the agenda, so we won't have a discussion about it tonight, but I do want to plant the seed as well as get feedback from the community. About a year ago, maybe a little bit more, Mr. Figueroa did express efforts, and even previous to that, I know I was invited, I believe, to go down to Atlanta as we work to recruit more minority teachers and at HBCUs. One of the comments that I made when we were thinking about going to Tennessee State is right now it's 20 degrees here, and in Memphis it's not 20 degrees, right? And so when you're trying to get individuals to relocate to this climate, to Waukegan, a place that they never heard of, we probably want to be creative with our recruitment efforts. We talked about the teachers from the Philippines, we talked about the teachers from Puerto Rico. One of the things that I would like us to look into is I don't support a residency requirement. I'll say that right off the bat. But what I do want is to encourage individuals to move into Waukegan. So I would like to examine a way to incentivize those who are looking to relocate. If we go to a Tennessee State, if we recruit at another campus, how can we give those individuals an incentive to come to Waukegan and commit for a period of time? They are doing this in New York as the cost of living continues to increase, and other school districts have piloted these type of programs as well. I also would like to look at if there's the opportunity to help teachers with down payment assistance for those who would choose to purchase in Waukegan. So I think these are two things that would help, encourage teachers to make Waukegan home, and help those who want to work in Waukegan be able to cover the expenses needed to move, right? If I'm a 21-year-old, just graduated college, as, Ms. Wozniak and others know, it may be hard to have the money to just pick up and move to a new area. So those are kind of two things that I wanted to bring up and put on your radar and work out. Margot talked about a good name, but I won't read those because but yes, having individuals. And so I've had conversations on other ways that we can incentivize, even by partnering and coordinating with the city of Waukegan and other entities to help in that regard. I also want to mention, as it relates to teacher recruitment and retention, working with the College of Lake County. So I was glad to have a conversation with individuals from the CLC Advisory Council, and we spoke about how we can work on 4 kind of priorities. And so I met with this group by invitation. And so I wanted to make sure that I kept the board informed as we have discussions. And the discussion centered around 4 goals. So goal number 1 was to develop a procedure for CLC and grow your own students to participate in classroom observations in District 60 during remote learning, hybrid classes, and the return to full-time on-site learning. Why this may become a board issue is one of the times when we talked about this before, we were requiring everybody on campus to have background checks. Background checks for a college student may be out of reach. So if that is something that we will require when we return to in person, how can we do that? So those are some of the questions that we have been looking at. But I do want to commend Mr. Cesario. He jumped on it right away, and we will be able to move forward with these observations during remote learning. Number 2 was the guarantee of at least a job interview for students who attended CLC and complete their 4-year degree at another location and are looking to return to the area. So how do we have something, not guaranteed job, but just giving them the opportunity to come and talk and actually meet with our principals or those who have the power to hire in District 60. Goal number 3 was the possibility for CLC and grow your own students to work in District 60 and non-certified programming or positions, while going to school to become certified teachers, right? So as we know with CLC, a lot of students are local, and one of the things that deters individuals from completing is they need money and income to survive. So if that was something that we could assist with while they continue to earn their degree, as we do with our Grow Your Own program, that would be helpful. And then goal number 4 was how to expand and improve the partnership with District 60, Grow Your Own, and CLC's Department of Education, right? As they look to transform the Lakeshore campus, they have a fairly new principal, and we have a long tenured history with CLC. We want to make sure that that partnership is strong and secure. So I just want to update the board on kind of that idea. And I also want to keep you guys posted as we continue the conversations with CLC and some of these Grow Your Own initiatives so that we can fulfill that pipeline. And you guys won't have to hear me complaining why we aren't hiring local again, because we will have the workforce here to do so. All right, we are now moving along to information items. So 16A, FY fiscal year 2020, non-discrimination and sexual harassment complaints annual review.
So that is me. Hi, everyone. This is Jeremy Duffy. As you know, I am the district's Title IX and non-discrimination coordinator. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of time this evening speaking about the complaints that the district received during the fiscal year 2020. So this would have been the 2019-2020 school year. Before I get started, is there someone, I don't have a way to control it, but my presentation is there. Is there a way for someone to pull it up and then advance the slides? Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and go on to the second slide. So what I'd like to do tonight is just give you a broad overview. This won't be a very long presentation, but I'd like to give you some information about the types of complaints that we are seeing, at least we're seeing, I should say, during the 2019-2020 school year. I'll talk about these mainly in 2 ways. One being related to complaints that were investigated pursuant to the district's uniform grievance policy. And then I'll also talk about some cases that were filed, but they were not formally investigated. So in those circumstances, the complaints themselves were screened out because they didn't meet certain requirements under board policy or even from a legal perspective. So going back and looking at our general totals, there were 22 cases that were filed during fiscal year 2020. As I mentioned, some of those were investigated under the Uniform Grievance Procedure. Some of them were not. There were 8 complaints that were investigated under the UGP, and there were 14 that were screened out. Again, if they were screened out, it was typically because they didn't meet the legal requirements or state a claim that could be investigated under the Uniform Grievance Procedure or under applicable law. And then the other instances, there are certainly certain situations where someone will file a complaint. I might meet with them as the district's Title IX and non-discrimination coordinator to gather some additional information, and they may choose not to pursue that complaint. And so there were 14 cases that were ruled out based on those means. I tried to throw in a number of graphics just because I think it's helpful to see the breakdown. But in terms of all alleged cases, you're looking at this pie chart on the left. This is broken down based on sexual harassment, which we have the largest number of cases in that area. And then our smallest number of cases, can you scroll down just a bit? Were actually the combined harassment and discrimination cases, and then there was everything in between. So this is a breakdown so that you can see what we're looking at in terms of all of the alleged cases during that fiscal year. On the right side of the screen, you see the allegations per age group, and this is based on who the complainant was. So the person that was filing the complaint, we keep track of who they are, and what level they are in within the district. So if they're a student, we look at whether or not they're elementary age, middle school, or high school. And then we also indicate if the complainant was a staff person. And as you can tell, the overwhelming majority of individuals who filed complaints were staff people. And I'll talk a little bit more about the breakdown of those complaints in just a moment. If there is, the notation for other is really anyone else that doesn't necessarily fall within the district itself. So it's not students, it's not staff. That's typically a community member, for example. Go ahead, next slide. So this next slide goes into additional detail about the cases that were investigated under the Uniform Grievance Procedure, and this is specifically looking at sexual harassment complaints. As the board may recall, we had a training not too long ago, at least back in the fall, around sexual harassment. This has been a very big initiative from the federal government over the years, and actually, as you know, back in, I believe it was May, the U.S. government issued new regulations related to sexual harassment. Now, the complaints that we're talking about here would have come before the new regulations, but nonetheless, sexual harassment has been a big area of focus for the U.S. government. And so we take close measure to make sure that we are looking at these cases carefully and we're addressing the needs as required by law. As you take a look at the breakdown here, 3 out of 8 allegations of the total that were actually investigated involve sexual harassment. The other cases involved harassment and or discrimination, so there was a few cases that included both, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. 2 of the allegations of those 3 were student harassment. And it's important to note that in both of those instances, there was a recommendation that the employee be terminated as a result of their misconduct. And then there was also 1 allegation of a student who was harassing a teacher. And in that case, and I've noted it here, there was a recommendation that some training be provided to students and also some improvement in communication protocols to address student harassment of staff specifically. You can go on to the next slide. So this, again, is 2 sets of charts that just breaks down these complaints further. So on the left, you see the breakdown of sexual harassment complaints based on the age of the individual. So we had 1 complaint that was an elementary student, we had 1 that was a middle school student, and then there was 1 that was staff. And again, these are only the complaints that were investigated under the UGP related to sexual harassment specifically. On the right-hand side, you see a percentage breakdown. So staff versus student, that was roughly a third of all of the complaints, and then the other 2/3 were student versus staff. You can continue. Next slide. The next slide gives you a breakdown of the cases that were investigated under the UGP related to harassment and discrimination. So I want to make it very clear that when we're speaking about harassment in this context, we're talking about harassment other than sexual harassment. So you could be harassed based on another protected category, such as your race or your religion or your age or something like that, and it's not a complaint that was sexual in nature. So I want to make that clear at the outset. With that said, there were 3 harassment cases that did not fall into the sexual harassment category. 2 of those were allegations of staff accusing other staff of harassment. There was 1 allegation of both teachers and elementary students accusing a staff person of harassment. There was 1 discrimination case, and that particular case was based on age discrimination. And then there was also 1 case that combined both harassment as well as discrimination. And this was an allegation of staff on staff harassment, but it included elements of both harassment as well as discrimination. At the very bottom, you'll notice that we tried to include some information about the general recommendations that were made in these cases. So it ranged pretty greatly, but there was everything from a written warning to a staff person, a remediation plan, anger management classes, referrals to HR, and then one of the things that we're always looking at is the engagement in the progressive problem solving policy, or from a policy perspective, so that we can be sure that we're addressing those issues internally as appropriate as well. So the next slide gives you some additional breakdown of those complaints. As you can see, this notes the allegations of both harassment and discrimination that we talked about on the previous slide, and this breaks it down by both the number of student complaints as well as the number of staff complaints. And I'm not going to read the information for you as it's stated there for you. You can go to the next slide. So of the cases that were screened out, so as I mentioned previously, there were some cases that didn't rise to the level of the requirements of the uniform grievance procedure, or they didn't meet the legal requirements to proceed forward as a complaint, or you have some cases where the complainant chose not to proceed with their complaint. So this slide focuses on those particular cases. As I mentioned before, there were 14 complaints that did not proceed under the uniform grievance procedure after there was an additional discussion or interview with the complainant. In some cases, those complaints were referred to the department level administration for further investigation or at least to be addressed. But again, these cases didn't specifically rise to the level of warranting an investigation under the uniform grievance procedure. So as you get into the bottom portion of this, there were 7 of the 14 allegations were sexual harassment related, and that made up roughly 50% of all of the complaints that were screened out. 4 of those allegations were students accusing staff or other adults, and 3 of those allegations were staff accusing staff. 3 of the allegations were reported as just harassment, and again, this is not sexual harassment, but harassment based on another protected category, such as race, gender, age, things like that, religion. And that made up roughly 21%. 2 of those instances were staff accusing staff. 1 was students accusing staff. 2 of the total 14 were reported as discrimination. That makes up roughly 14% of the allegations, with both of those being staff accusing other staff of discrimination. And then you have 1 allegation that was related to harassment and discrimination. And then you also have 1 allegation that was reported as aggressive behavior. So this gives you the full breakdown of all 14 of those cases that were not investigated under the uniform grievance procedure. You can go to the next slide. So this chart gives you a breakdown of the data that was in the previous slide. but it does help give you a visual so that you can see what is the breakdown based on students and staff, and what were the numbers like for those cases where the complaint was not investigated under the uniform grievance procedure. Next slide. So I want to leave you with a couple notes. As you all know, I started with the district back in February of 2020. So many of these complaints were not complaints that I investigated, but nonetheless, I think we can draw some reasonable conclusions after I've gone through all of them. And I'd like to share a few of those points with you. One of the things that I think is extremely important is that we continue to ensure that staff are trained on the difference between what constitutes legal harassment and discrimination and what, on the other hand, is simply a dissatisfaction with what's going on in the workplace. You should know that this is really important because it's something that comes up on a repeated basis as we're getting complaints in. Oftentimes there is, some confusion around what actually constitutes legal harassment or discrimination, and sometimes we're simply seeing an employee perhaps who is disgruntled with their supervisor or a fellow coworker, and they're coming in and saying that's that's harassment or discrimination, and then my job is to really get all the facts and do an assessment as to the law itself to determine whether or not that is in fact the case. But with that said, I do want you to know that we are working on this as a whole, and one of the presentations that we did, Tom Morris and I actually did the presentation for the 2020 legal conference for our district administrators, was on this topic, at least in part. And so we are certainly looking at this, and it's something that we should continue to look at because I think it's an important issue as we move forward. The other thing that I think we have to think about is how will this information also be shared with the entire district staff? So we did the 2020 legal conference for our administrators, but we certainly are continuing to engage in conversations with our administrators to figure out how this type of information is going to be shared much broadly with everyone on staff. The next thing that I wanted to point out is that under the new Title IX regulations, the district really has to consider how they want to train everyone on Title IX sexual harassment, because all employees now under the new regulations have obligations to report sexual harassment whenever it occurs. And so, this is something that we're also continuing to work on and thinking about, how do we get this information out to everyone? This was the topic of another presentation for the 2020 legal conference for our administrators. But again, we've got to think about what happens in terms of getting this out to every employee. And then last but not least, we are working with our area superintendents and other administrators to provide some age-appropriate trainings to students on both harassment and discrimination. This is something that is ongoing. We're continuing to look at that. This is also probably an area that we'd like to do this type of presentation in person rather than virtually, but it's certainly something that we're working on and have plans to address as soon as we can once students are back in the building. So with that, I believe I'm finished. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Mr. Duffy. This is Leguizamo. I have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
So just to be clear, for the sexual harassment cases that are under and outside the uniform grievance procedure, all of those reports are reported to DCFS. Is that correct?
It depends on the nature of the complaint. If it involves a student, typically yes, depending on the circumstances, but I would say generally speaking, yes.
Thank you for that. And also in regards to, I know we just recently updated our Title IX board policy here. I don't remember, but do you recall the frequency of Title IX training?
So the regulations don't actually provide a frequency. So that's a really good question. But it's certainly something that we are looking at providing likely on an annual basis because it's such an important topic. And so, you know, we just did a presentation for our administrators. And I would anticipate that we'll be doing that again for the next legal conference or in some other way to make sure that that's occurring every year.
Yeah, that is something that, that's the reason why I asked that, because that is something that I would anticipate that we do on an annual basis. And I would like to update the board policy in relation to that if it is not, if the frequency on there is not listed.
I'll have to double check. I don't know if the board policy itself says how often we'll do that training, but certainly we have been working with the intent that that training would be ongoing and likely every year.
And
thank you for that. Those were all my board president.
No
Mr.
problem.
Duffy, I just have a follow-up based on Ms. Leguizamo's. Is this something that, to your knowledge, that we're doing when we're onboarding? So like we obviously hired throughout the entire year. We just hired 15 individuals. If we, for example, do the training every year in October, is there a mechanism in place to make sure that, you know, new employees to the district are receiving that training as well?
So that's actually a very good and timely question. I am working with Mr. Alajakis right now to work on creating a database of some sort related to those types of trainings. And so that type of a training hopefully will be something that when we are onboarding individuals into the district, they can go to a database of recorded trainings. They would get that training. They would have that information right away as they start. That is not currently in place, but it's certainly something that we are looking at and hope to get up and running very soon.
So this is Kathy Vanderbrook. While Mr. Duffy was speaking, I did pull up the Title IX Uniform Grievance Procedure Policy, and on page 10, it addresses training, and there is annual training required for employees. The complaint managers and coordinators have training requirements no less than every 2 years.
Thank you, Ms. Vanderbrook. I thought that was the case, but I couldn't remember exactly what the language stated.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you for that, Ms. Vanderbrook.
A question, we mentioned employees, but at the same time, I heard you talk a lot about students. What role do they play in terms of training and understanding the mechanism of harassment, so to speak?
So that's at the very end of the presentation, I made a reference to that. And, you know, that's certainly something that we're looking at. We would like to see more training opportunities for students on that issue. And so we're working to get that rolled out this year. As I mentioned, you know, it's a training that we think would probably be better served for students face-to-face rather than virtually. But it's certainly something that we're looking at this year. I think from there, the decision would just have to be made as to whether or not we'd like to do something like that annually or biannually or something like that. But it certainly could be done, and it's something that we're thinking about.
Thank you.
I would highly encourage, I know as we talk about things changing, that was, and we look at our middle school specifically, unfortunately, because we talk about these things later and we don't catch it on the front end, we're usually dealing with it on the back end. So I know we started in relationship to suicides is, you know, every year in gym, at least in the high school, there would be a few days that were dedicated to, you know, knowing the signs of suicide and suicide prevention, and was wondering if there was a way to implement that into some type of training. Is because I did, you know, and as adolescents get older, those are the things where I, you know, mentioned when I was in school, right? And we all know, and some of us experience, but bra strapping, you know, snapping bras and doing those type of things. And that is considered sexual harassment, but a lot of times the students aren't taught it in that way. So I would definitely recommend that we move forward with that. And I agree with, you know, the administration and Mr. Duffy that that is a lesson that should be taught in person and sensitively, right? Any other questions for Mr. Duffy? All right, so we are going to move on to, I guess, there is no technically new business. Is there any new business items that any of the board members would like to bring up this evening?
Board President, this is Leguizamo. I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Leguizamo.
Thank you for that. And this question would be to the superintendent. So Superintendent, I'd like to understand, do we have someone in our school district that is following immigration laws?
So Mrs. Leguizamo, can you speak more on that? And then I'm going to defer to Tom if we're talking about the law, but I think just if you can narrow your question a little bit more.
Sure, I can elaborate a little bit more. So what it is that I've been following the updates on DACA, and I have found that one of the requirements under the new DACA is that the DACA participants must show like a monthly proof of residency in the United States. And some immigrational lawyers are suggesting for DACA participants to request school attendance records. And so I'd like to understand if our school district is equipped to handle these types of requests, because it is something that is asked and needs to have a fast turnaround. And so I was wondering if there's something similar to this in our school district, like requesting school transcripts, maybe on our website, a type of thing. So just trying to understand if we've been following immigration laws and how it correlates with the school district, and that is one example.
Mr. Morris, can I turn that over to you? I don't even know if you're prepared to answer that. I am definitely not.
I'm not sure I'm totally responsive. Immigration matters are something that we do track through our continuing legal education, and we do get updates from various outside law firms on various developments involving immigration. We've used outside counsel for specific questions involving visas, that sort of thing. Any kind of immigration issue that's raised by an employee, if it's a specific detail that's outside of our knowledge. I'm not familiar with this matter that you just raised with respect to DACA and their need to obtain records from the school district to support their status. I hadn't heard about that one, so that is news. We routinely get requests for student records. I probably remarked before you came on the board, some of you may remember that that was the biggest shock I ever received when I came in-house. I had no idea the number of requests for records involving students that we get on a regular basis. That's not a FOIA request. That's just requests that come in from law firms, subpoenas, court documents, individuals, other schools. It's just a big part of what the school districts and schools within the district have to do. I would not be too concerned about, our compliance with those kinds of requests, assuming that's a lawful. If a student needs information about their records, they certainly would be entitled to get it. We'll be looking at the legitimacy of requests by outside entities and the legality of that when and if it presents itself. But to my knowledge, that question has not yet arisen in a practical sense from either the schools or any students seeking that sort of information. Is that responsive to your question?
Yes, Mr. Morris, thank you for that. And so I'm looking at, in regards to, as we're looking in regards to equity, that our DACA participants that are within our school boundaries have access to this and easy access to this, similar to, like I said, school transcript requests, right? So that's just something that I was wondering, and just kind of wondering if the school district has been following that. Not really sure where to go with that, but I did just want to have, I know that was something that was new, something that I found out in regards to a Facebook Live that was held by an immigration lawyer recently.
Thanks for raising the visibility of it. Apparently Eric is reporting that we do take those kinds of requests all the time. So it sounds like it's already being handled by Mr. Christensen, I'm sure quite ably, and apparently without any particular controversy.
All right, that sounds great. The other question that I have, or the second new business topic, was for the superintendent, just wondering do we have a specific department that manages and monitors training for our personnel and students?
Sorry, Ms. Lego's almost having a little difficulty with my computer. We do have a system where we log professional development hours, and that sits in academics, but students wouldn't be a part of that, no.
Okay, and the reason why I brought this up, and so this, I've been meaning to bring this up for a while here. This is something that I have seen many businesses have. There's a specific training department, one or two people kind of thing, that monitors who's doing what training, what are the required training in every position, what are optional training, when are they doing the training, how often they're doing it, right? And are they compliant with training? And so I know this is something probably, I don't know if schools usually do something like this, but I think in such a big school district that we are, there's a lot of personnel. Our board policies calls in regards to stating that, training should be done on so many frequent basis. So I'm just wondering, in regards to being compliant with board policies, in regards to training, if this is something that maybe we need to venture into, having a particular training department that monitors all training throughout for our personnel and students.
It's something that we can look into, so I will note your question and we will come back to the board with that and get some more information.
Thank you for that. Those were my two new discussions, Board President.
Oh yeah, and I'll piggyback on Ms. Leguizamo. I get nasty grams all the time for not doing my trainings at work, right? So it keeps you honest, and I get them from my team too. So it's the accountability factor, and addresses the thing that I think Mr. Duffy was saying is, or that I raised related to onboarding is, so there are annual trainings, and then typically if you're hired after that annual training period, you receive a suite of trainings before you would be allowed in the classroom or on a site with individuals. So thank you, Superintendent, for capturing that question, and that may be something through the HR department. I would also encourage us to look, are there any systems that we already have that would do the same thing, right? So without having to purchase a new system. Any other new business? Otherwise, I'm going to jump down to legal reports. Ms. Wozniak.
I have a couple of discussion topics, I guess. It's more not necessarily new business. I'd like to discuss getting rid of the insurance charges for the Chromebooks in the future. It's we had a presentation at our III where they had new Chromebooks for everybody and no charges. And I'd like us to also, with our low-income students, be able to give that to everyone, that option. And another discussion topic is, now that everybody has Chromebooks, and it's not anything that has to have, in-school suspensions, I would like the students to be able to be in school suspension and monitor their class so they're not getting more behind than they already are. Now that it's acceptable remote learning, we should be able to accommodate that so that the students aren't losing more time. And then it's something that came up once the teachers and staff are all immunized, vaccinated. Could we maybe think about returning the seniors in an earlier phase so that they are together at least part of the time, if we can, by the end of the year, so that they do have some sense of connection to our schools and their senior class? I'd like to look at that. And this is kind of an old business one, mental health facility. I think we need to really work on getting that up and running, because the suicide at Glenbrook North, that is really something that I would not like to see in our district. And we need to start working on a more robust mental health facility and action plan.
Thank you for those, Ms. Wozniak and Superintendent. Did you capture those? And I don't know, Mr. Alajakis, if you can keep those on our running list of discussion topics.
Yeah, we may need to circle back with you just to ensure that we captured all, but if we need to, we can circle back with Ms. Callahan-Wozniak.
I think they're already on there.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. So legal reports.
No additional report.
Okay, we are at board member time, so I will go based on the way that I see you, but I'll actually start off this time with Mr. McBride. You there, Mr. McBride? Think we might have lost Jeff. Ms. Leguizamo.
Thank you, Board President. I actually don't have anything to say, but otherwise just welcome everyone into the new year. And I hope that we get to finish this school year strong, even though we are still during these times in which we thought that maybe it didn't last this long. So hopefully we can finish strong. That's all I have to say. Thank you and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Leguizamo. Mr. Riddle.
Just again, welcome everybody into this new year, and hope we move forward, as Ms. Leguizamo said, strong and stronger than we've been in our country and together as a school district, and with the hope that we can get back into in-person before the year is up, at least on a somewhat of a hybrid approach. And I know we're going to hear more about that at our next meeting. And then I would just mention or highlight one of the chats. Ms. Gillian mentioned the Good Neighbor Next Door program. We should definitely advertise that to especially our newer teachers coming into our district who might be looking for homes. I know several teachers in our district who purchased homes under that Good Neighbor Next Door, which is open to first responders as well as teachers. Some teachers don't realize that. I know several teachers in our district who have purchased homes, and you get a home. Not every home qualifies, so you have to, the program is set up by the federal government, but you can buy a home and purchase it for half of what it is going for. So if it was $100,000, you will end up, if you stay 3 years, you will only pay $50,000 for the home. So it's a great benefit already available. Federal government runs it. Most realtors know about it. So I think we should make that available to all of our new teachers, let them know about that to encourage them to live in Waukegan. Have a good night, folks. Thank you.
Mr. Castellanos.
Happy New Year, everyone. I missed you all. I missed my fellow board members too, seeing little boxes there. So welcome to the new year, and it's going to be a much better one.
Awesome. Ms. Wozniak.
Happy New Year, everybody. And I look forward to the rollout and of the vaccines, and that a rapid rollout for the vaccine so that we can all get back to some sense of normalcy.
I don't know, Ms. Placencia, any closing thoughts?
Thank you. We just want to wish everyone a happy new year and welcome back from break.
And same, I spoke enough earlier, so thank you all so much for tuning in this evening. I do want it noted, Board of Education, that is 8:17 and we are done with our board meeting. You guys have a great evening. With that, I'd like the motion to adjourn.
Mr. Riddle, I so move we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Wozniak. A roll call vote, please.
Ms. Callahan Wozniak,
Yes.
Ms. Leguizamo,
Yes.
Mr. Riddle,
Yes.
Mr. Castellanos,
Yes.
Mr. McBride, Mr. Ewing.
Yes, meeting adjourned. See you all next Tuesday for our student achievement and operation meetings. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Good
This
night, everyone.
conference is no
Have a great
longer
night.
being recorded.